Are the Pittsburgh Penguins capable of having a historic repeat of their Stanley Cup win from a season ago? Can the league's infusion of young talent ascend to the next level in their progression? And what are some under the radar headlines that no one is talking about? That's right, with summer rapidly coming to an end, it's time for another NHL season to take center ice. And to get you up to speed on everything you need to know for this upcoming year, I enlisted the insights of Jared Clinton, a senior writer for the Hockey News, who joined me earlier this week to dish on everything relating to the NHL. So first of all, Jared, we want to take the opportunity and welcome you to the Two-Man Advantage podcast, and we're excited to talk some NHL hockey with you tonight.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Kevin.
So when we look at the overall landscape of this upcoming hockey season, what are three things that our viewers need to know about this upcoming hockey season in your estimation?
Well, I think one of the things that's kind of become a hot button issue right now is we're seeing a crackdown on penalties, and I think that's a big thing right now. It's become a highly publicized issue, the penalties that are happening during this preseason right now, and I think it's one of the things that's going to continue to be a storyline throughout the year. I think one of the other things that people really need to keep an eye on too is we're kind of entering this interesting era with the game where we've shifted to a younger era, I guess you could call it. The youth movement is really strong in the NHL right now, and I think it's kind of the youth that's ruling the day, and I think that's so it's always a fun thing to watch when you see these kind of generational shifts happen, or these sea changes in the way the game is played. And I think the other big thing that you can kind of keep an eye on this year, there's two big divisional races that I think are going to happen. That's in the Central and the Metropolitan Division. And those are going to be, tooth and nail as far as getting playoff spots go. So I think those should be really, really fun to watch.
And when we look at storylines that could surprise in terms of teams, coaches, or players, what are two storylines that you might be surprised with if you were a betting man?
Well, I don't know if you could call them a sleeper team per se, but the Carolina Hurricanes this season are one of those teams that have kind of done everything the right way as far as rebuilding the organization. They've really put a big focus on drafting and development. They haven't tried to jump the gun and speed this process up at all. What they've done is just remain patient with it. Tried to build around the young core that they have, and they've brought in pieces now to supplement what they had built. And it's reached a point where the Hurricanes are looking at possibly competing for a postseason spot for the first time in a long time. Like I said, I don't know if you call them a sleeper or a big time surprise. So if you're looking for teams that are maybe more in that vein, you're probably looking maybe at the Arizona Coyotes and Buffalo Sabres. The Coyotes have done a lot this offseason. They traded for Nicholas Halmerson. They got Antti Ranta. They got Derek Stepan. They just recently traded for Jason Demers. So they've really refreshed that roster, especially the blue line, with a few additions. And it's really impressive what John Shake has been able to do in Arizona. So they could be a team that really takes a step forward, kind of unexpectedly. As for the Sabres, I just think the return of Jack Eichel there really stands to give this organization a boost that it desperately needs. Right now, they've kind of been stagnant over the past couple of seasons, and I think that city and that franchise are really looking for the next step forward. And if Eichel can play as he did last season when he came back from injury, there's a good chance that this team does finally make some noise and maybe pushes for a wild card spot at the very best.
And Joey, who do you think is the biggest challenger for Pittsburgh in terms of a repeat in this upcoming NHL season?
Yeah, at the Hockey News, we actually did in our season preview. We picked the Penguins to three-peat. So coming up with a challenger is tough to say, but I think if there is a challenger, you kind of have to look at it two ways. First, you have to look at who's going to come out of the Eastern Conference. And in the East, Pittsburgh's going to have an unfamiliar challenger, I think, because the Tampa Bay Lightning missed the postseason last year, kind of surprisingly. The injury to Steven Stamkos didn't help, but I think that's really a team to watch this year. I don't think they're going to fly under the radar per se. Everyone knows what the Lightning are capable of, especially when they have their full roster intact. And I think that's really a team to watch. They've done everything right as far as team building goes, and Steve Yzerman, GM in Tampa Bay, gets all the credit in the world for the job he's done, and rightfully so, because he's built an organization that can probably compete with a team that has won back-to-back Stanley Cups like the Penguins. So you look at it as in the sense of the Penguins coming out of the Eastern Conference. So Tampa Bay is probably the greatest challenger there. So Tampa Bay could be a team that kind of knocks the Penguins off the mountain, if you will. But if the Penguins do happen to get out of the Eastern Conference, I think the team we picked, as a magazine, as a group, to challenge for the Stanley Cup, the Edmonton Oilers, is probably a safe bet. You look at the progression that team took, or the steps forward that team took last year, and it was phenomenal to watch. We watched the development of Connor McDavid, the way Leon Draisaitl's played. It is a really, really top to bottom impressive organization right now as well. I think they have more depth than people realize up front. The defense, maybe there are still some questions about whether or not they're as deep as they need to be to compete and really fight for a Stanley Cup. But I think, the goaltending of Cam Talbot gives them an X factor there that, even if the defense isn't up to snuff, he played it out of his mind last year. I really think he can be that kind of player that steals a series or even steals a championship for that team, if the offense can provide him with, enough of a cushion.
And tell me, how do you see the Western Conference shaking out?
Yeah, I would assume that it is the Oilers. Well, I shouldn't say I assume, but I think if there is a team that seems like the most viable option to come out of the West, it's going to be the Oilers. And I think the reason for that is you just look at the way the other divisions are built up, and getting out of the Central Division this season. I mentioned the Central Division earlier, is going to be so incredibly tough. I can honestly say I think it's going to be the most difficult division for any team to get out of. And I think just getting out of that division is going to be such a grind for whatever team does make it, that by the time they reach the Western Conference Final, if they are playing the Oilers, and I think that's a bet that I would feel safe making, that they're going to be gassed to the point where we might be looking at a team that can't really keep up to the Oilers' speed anymore. So I think Western Conference-wise, the Oilers are really the team to watch.
And tell me, how do you think the salary cap has sort of changed the competitive balance of the NHL as a whole?
Yeah, it is kind of the great equalizer, right? I think really what's changed with the salary cap is obviously it allows the smaller market teams to remain competitive if they've built the right way. I mean, we talked about Carolina, and there's a lot of focus on the way that they built their team. As I mentioned, they brought in these young players, they signed them to good contracts, and they've kept costs down. In a salary cap era, that's something that they're able to do because there's benefits to those players for staying in town. They can give them longer contracts, they can give the additional year. Plus, as a smaller market team, you look for those players, and maybe you're not spending on the big name guys, but that forces you to draft and develop that way. And the teams that draft and develop now, especially in this era, are the teams who have been more successful and have been better. As far as the great equalizer thing goes, I think the way it works now is you just have no team that can really stack itself to the gills. You don't have a team, back before the salary cap, there was years there where Detroit's payroll was, 10 times, not literally, but, exponentially more than that of some of the smaller market clubs. And you just don't see that anymore. And I think what that does is allows the talent to be dispersed more evenly. And then, that forces parity. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up for debate, of course, but I think that's the thing the salary cap has really been best at, if you want to say best, is forcing that parity in a way that it hadn't had maybe before.
And tell me, which second-year player are you most looking forward to wanting to take the next step in their progression this season?
Yeah, I think someone that is obviously going to get talked about a lot is Austin Matthews. He's right in Toronto, which is for better or worse, and some people would certainly say worse, the center of the hockey universe sometimes. And Matthews is he is one of those players where you watch him play and he does something almost every night that you think, how is a kid his age doing that at this level? And it's very impressive to watch him play. And it's not just his offense, because his offense is obviously there. He scored 40 goals last year. He put up 69 points. Those are impressive totals, of course. But I think the one thing that impresses about him is his responsibility in every zone. He's not making mistakes very often, if at all. And that's rare in young players. So I think another year older and another year wiser, it'll be really interesting to see what he does. But he's not the only guy, though, and that's, I think, one of the interesting things about, when I talked about the youth movement earlier. I think you've got guys, Mikko Rantanen is a guy who I've written about quite a bit in Colorado, and he's got this offensive ability that I think is untapped right now. He put up 20 goals last year, or 18 goals rather, I believe, and I think he's got potential to be 20, 30 goal scorer even this year, which seems far-fetched on a team that was as limited offensively as the Avalanche were last season, but I really do think he has that ability. And then you also look, at Patrick Laine as a guy who is really interesting to me. I'm based in Winnipeg, so I see a lot of him. And he's just got this phenomenal ability to shoot the puck. And I think we were kind of robbed of having a rookie goal race last year, not because Laine fell off or because Matthews fell off, but because Laine got injured. And, if he plays a full 82-game season and Matthews plays a full 82-game season, we don't often talk about sophomore points races, but I think that's one of the ones that we might be able to watch and have a little bit of fun with, seeing who scores more this season, Laine or Matthews.
And which new face in a new place are you most intrigued to watch this year?
I hate to keep going back to Carolina, but Scott Darling going to Carolina is something that I think can really pay big dividends for that organization. For the past several years, 3, 4, 5 years now, one thing that's really sunk the Hurricanes is their lack of a true number one goaltender. They had Eddie Lack there, they had Cam Ward there, but those two guys just simply weren't getting the job done, and that's troublesome for a team that had so much promise and really could have been competing much earlier than they are than the timelines allowed them to. And I think that's we're at the point where if Darling performs, he can be one of those top 5, top 10 guys just by the way the system around him plays. Carolina is so good at the possession game, so good at insulating their goaltender. They just need someone who can be there and actually stop the puck. Statistically, Darling's been very, very good over the past couple of years, and I think the hope is that he takes a step forward this year even and proves that not only was Carolina right to take a chance on him as their number one, but that taking a chance on him as the number one is going to allow them to make the playoffs for the first time in a handful of years.
Now, whether it be a coach, a team, or a player, who do you think has the most to prove this year?
Yeah, it's interesting you say coaches, actually, because I think, all the players, to different extent, every player goes into the season with an amount of pressure on them. I think everybody, every team, every coach, every player does. But I think this season, more than ever, the two guys I'm really paying attention to the most as far as personal pressure goes is two coaches. In Washington, I'd say Barry Trotz is really under the gun here. The Capitals have flamed out in the postseason every year under him right now, and he's got this kind of, this cloud hanging over him where they want to get through the second round of the postseason. They want to get to the place they believe they can be, which is the Stanley Cup final and winning the Stanley Cup. And I think if Trotz can't get the job done this year, there's really some conversations that we had about whether or not they bring him back, which is awfully surprising given he spent the first almost 2 decades of his career coaching with the same organization. And then I think you also look at Winnipeg, and that one's close to home for me, so I can pay more attention to that than almost anything, and that's the situation with Paul Maurice, because yes, he was just given a contract extension, and yes, yes, the Jets have all this potential and all this promise, but I think there's really this kind of situation, this scenario in which maybe a playoff-less season or finish in the league basement doesn't really help him stick around in town. And, obviously the hope is that that's not the case, but we're looking at a division, like I mentioned, in the Central Division that is as tough as any. So realistically, it could be one of those years where Maurice does everything right and still the team, doesn't succeed to the extent the management and the ownership wants them to, and that could cause some problems for him.
Now, in our region of the country, we cover the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs a lot, and I'm wondering if you could give me a thumbnail just on the diametrically different places both franchises are, because I think when you look at the Red Wings, they're at a point where they really don't know where they're going, and they really don't have a base of players that would inspire you to get excited about the Red Wings. And conversely, when you look at the Maple Leafs, they have all that young offensive talent. So I'm wondering if you could give me a thumbnail on the state of both of those teams.
Yeah, it's hard to add to that because I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I think what you're getting at is, like I said, exactly the point. Detroit doesn't have a core group that you really think that they can build around right now. They have core pieces, and I think they have pieces that can lead them to success, but I don't know if any of those pieces are really what you call the future of the organization. And I think right now that's what Detroit is looking for. The Red Wings really want to be able to take that step forward and really want to get back to that to their winning ways. But I think in order to do that, they need to have some years where they don't succeed. And I think that's kind of, you mentioned the Red Wings and the Maple Leafs, and I think that's an interesting conversation because we're at a point where the Red Wings almost need to mimic what the Maple Leafs have done. And that's, I'm not saying tank or fail on purpose, but I think it kind of behooves the Red Wings to finish near the bottom of the standings for a year or two, to get high draft picks and kind of replenish their system in a way that they haven't been able to because they've had low draft picks for the past 20 years. And I think that's really where they're at. So I think Detroit, as far as finishing this year, we're probably looking at something around the basement of the league, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not what anybody wants to hear. Of course, everybody wants their team to win, but sometimes losing can serve a purpose, and I think for Detroit, that's the place we're at. When it comes to the Maple Leafs, like you said, they have all this exciting young talent, and I think what we're looking for from the Maple Leafs this year is another step forward, and I do think that they can take that step forward too. They've beefed up a little bit on the blue line with the addition of Ron Hainsey. The young guys are another year older, and unlike Detroit, Toronto has that clear core, and these are the guys who are going to drive them forward. And I think with the Maple Leafs, we're looking at. I don't want to guarantee because anything can happen, but I don't want to guarantee a playoff spot. But if that team makes the playoffs again, I think, as we saw in the first round last year, they could be dangerous in a 7-game series. So I would not put it past them to win a round or maybe even 2 like the Oilers did last year if the Maple Leafs make the playoffs again.
And my final question for you is, why should people be excited about this upcoming hockey season? I'm wondering if you can give me maybe two or three reasons why fans should be excited about the upcoming year.
I think one of the things that always excites me about the league is the unpredictability of it. I think every year we go into it and we make these, the Hockey News does it, every news organization does it. We make these predictions about what's going to happen in the year, and some are bang on and others are way, way off. And I think that's almost some of the fun is, when you are wrong by that much, you get to kind of analyze why you were wrong by that much. And I think oftentimes the most fun stories are the stories that nobody necessarily saw coming. And so if there's a team that succeeds or overachieves, if you will, I think that's always really fun. And I think that happens more in hockey than it does in the other, 4 major sports, just because there's so many factors at play. It's not like baseball. It's not like football. It's not like it's not like basketball where you can, have three guys control a team. This is a sport where, one strange bounce off the boards or off the glass can change a season for better or worse sometimes. So I think that's one thing that always excites me about the season starting. I think one of the other things is, I mentioned the young talent in the league, and we are seeing this generation of new superstars, and it's not new stars; it is new superstars. Guys like Sidney Crosby, guys like Alex Ovechkin. They're not out of their prime, but they're starting to, they're reaching their 30s. They're getting into the middle of their careers, but we're starting to see the next wave. The Connor McDavids, the Austin Matthews, the Patrick Laine's. We're going to see all these new fantastic battles between stars of a caliber that we haven't seen come into the league in the past decade. So I think that's always, one of the most exciting things is when you have these like singular talents that really get you out of your seat and draw you in and make you want to watch. The headline players, if you will. And if there's a third thing to watch for, I'd say honestly, the Penguins. We haven't seen a three-peat champion in the NHL in more than 30 years at this point. And I think it'd be really amazing to see a team be able to pull that off. There's been modern dynasties or pseudo-dynasties with the Kings and the Blackhawks, but I think this is the first real chance we have at seeing a legitimate dynasty in the salary cap era. And that's a really, really exciting thing, because dynasties get people to watch. Nobody, everyone will complain about a team winning over and over and over again, but it creates for one team, it creates this team of epic proportions, this untoppable team, and for the rest of the league, it creates the supervillain, and I think that's a really fun, battle of power, and I think that's always a good reason to watch the game.
And Jared, we want to thank you for your time and insight as we get ready for another hockey season, and we want to wish you the best of luck in covering this season at the Hockey News, buddy. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Kevin.